an easy, super simple intake process, really, really important. That discovery call, 15 minutes is usually the length that is scheduled. Also really important because we can synchronize. And then the rest happens in the tool. All the conversations, all the data documentation, inviting a vendor to upload certain documentation, all that happens in the orchestration tool. And that's the power of like, now I don't need to explain to you or to the next approver where we're at. I can spend my time explaining to them how to read a ticket. I do that once, right?
Yeah.
Request. But now if the next 50 times that happens or 100 times, they actually know.
Thanks so much for joining another edition of The Never-Ending Climb for a Stronger Supply Chain and Procurement. Today, we have the pleasure of being joined by Søren Pech. And Søren is a procurement pro with 15 years of experience in procurement, another 10 in finance. So he really understands what the finance guys are looking for. And that's across retail, banking, insurance, and others. Søren, thank you so much for making some time to join us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
So I know there's an unpopular opinion that I think is important for more people to hear, because I don't think enough people understand the idea that most procure-to-pay systems are more finance systems than they are procurement systems. Can you help? Let's explore that together, because not enough people understand what people mean when they say that.
Yeah. Ultimately, I believe that a procure-to-pay system is there to help with invoice reconciliation and a matching of invoices and so forth. And ultimately, that's the reason for those systems. Procurement historically oftentimes reports up to finance. There's also an organizational alignment where procurement, as a cost savings department for many companies, needs to work in the systems that are used by finance. And so the P2P space, they act as if they are procurement software, but they are essentially finance software. And so procurement is just happy to have anything that looks like software and gets you out of email and Excel. And so as a result, I think you use the approval flow in your P2P system to kind of act as if you actually are kind of using that for your procurement process. The issue is that none of the relevant information, or very little of the relevant information that are part of the procurement process, such as legal review, InfoSec review, IT integration review, and all those things that are usually part of especially when you buy software of that type of review, none of that gets captured in your P2P approvals. And even if it were to get captured, if you say, hey, the IT person has to approve, you don't know what got approved and what got you to that approval. So all that information around, hey, let's discuss this and how do we make sure that the legal language aligns with how we're building the system, none of that is there. And so, you have very little information. And most of the information still sits in emails or Excel spreadsheets or shared files, but outside of where the approval actually happened. So that's the problem with the P2P system. Now, the players would like to pretend that they are a procurement system, but for the procurement professionals that are wondering how that works, ultimately it's not, and it falls woefully short, which is the reason why procurement is just stuck in flowing information from one system to the other, reintroducing a conversation again and again and again, and it's all administrative and not value add. And that's a real problem because you really don't move the ball forward. You're just trying to make sure that the ball stays in play.
What I love about that is that it's so important to remind everybody that managing spend and make sure that the invoice matches the PO and the receipt that's the tail end of the process, right? What you're buying and how you're setting up, whether it's direct or indirect, how you're setting those things up to be successful in the actual transactions, in the ongoing execution. That's where the value is. So you can try to manage the spend, but if everybody's optimizing for managing spend instead of, are you spending on the right things? it's kind of a waste.
Yeah, and it's the back end. So when you think about P2P, managing spend, by the way, a news update, the finance department does that, right? So they make sure that they keep good records. The procurement department obviously helps with saying, hey, this is a correct invoice, and this is how that invoicing matches up to the contract and that kind of stuff. But ultimately, we're just back end accounting for what's already been done,
Yeah.
right?
It's
So
too late to change it now. You've got the invoice.
yeah, you are, this thing is already in the middle. So you can debate that, but you don't really influence it, right? And
Yeah.
so it's the backwards looking view, again, administrative, reactive versus, strategic and proactive.
And
And that's where the fault line is between what these systems, like a P2P system, can do and doesn't do.
yeah, it's the driving the value versus trying to make sure that we dotted the I's and crossed the T's.
That's right.
I know that there's a lot of folks out there that are looking forward to better ways to go and create the value in the first place. And I love the way that the things that days of old, right? We'll call it our parents' generation, were told that the things that you need to do this well included all of these administrative things. One of those things that just feels like a waste is a great big complicated procurement policy. Can you share a little more about why procurement policies can be a giant waste?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think there's one person that has read the procurement policy, and that's the person that wrote it, right? Nobody, no stakeholder ever, unless he or she is a unicorn, right, has ever read the policy before submitting a request or asking for help, right? And so procurement policies, they are useful in the sense of let's get all on the same page, right? I don't necessarily need to formulate that out, but ideally, what you have is a process that reflects the policy with all its intricacies, right? If I'm buying a software that has PII data, I have a different type of review than if I have a software that doesn't have PII data. Or if I buy a service, that's a different type of procurement review, a procurement process, right? Than if I buy a software and that kind of stuff. Just very simplistically. And
Yeah.
ideally, you have a process that reflects that automatically when it's submitted, versus somebody opening up page 37 of the 65-page document to say, after this step, now I can expect this step to happen, right? So ideally, your procurement process is so clearly defined that it's obvious as in like I can see it, what the steps are,
Yep.
versus somebody needing to read the tea leaves in something that's in procurement speak and pages and pages long.
Yeah, and I think the idea that people have time to go and read a policy before they go buy something is a little dated. I have not met too many professionals lately who have extra time to go and make sure they learn how the policy works before they go do something. The
It's like those,
expectation today is you hit next, and it walks you through the process and doing it correctly.
yes, when you buy software for yourself, right? There's always this user agreement. And if you scroll through it, it's pages and pages long. Nobody's read it.
Yeah.
It's one of
Well,
those things. So you want to put yourself in the shoes of somebody that submits a request 1 to 4 times a year. That's probably all there's to it. And
yeah.
even if they did it 2 months ago, they will have forgotten about it. Like, right. So it has to be, the user experience has to be so intuitive, user grade, UI or UX, in the sense that the system or your process kind of guides the user through it. And there's no mystery in terms of, hey, where we're at.
Yeah. I call that the perpetual novice because
Mhm.
they're a novice every single
Yep.
time they come back to it because they don't do it often enough. They're not going to go to training. They're not going to read the policy. They have too
That's
much
right.
going on. They know what they need. They need it now, and they need that to be easy. So if we think about how that translates into what good looks like for intake and orchestration, one of the things that I have always believed is that the tool could be just like PowerPoint. And you can either make a brilliant presentation or You can have the one that has the audience asleep or
Yeah.
leaving the room. And like any tool, you can do great things with it or horrible things, but it is but a tool. So can you share what you see as good today in execution of rolling out and getting value out of intake and orchestration?
Yeah, Sean, I think you're making a uh, very good point when you can describe the user as highly inexperienced, right? Or the perpetual novice. That's really the case. So you want to, as a procurement professional, you want to put yourself in their shoes to say, hey, how would I design this that I maximize usage of the process, right? Because the reason why people come late to you as a procurement professional is because they don't understand the process. Process is too complicated. It's historically always taken too long. And the only time that you get everybody all hands on deck is that if you come to procurement and said, hey, I'm about to sign this and this needs to be done tomorrow, right? And all of a sudden everybody spins into action, and all of a sudden, stuff happens faster. But the point is that if you design, and I use intake to procure and orchestration interchangeably. I think those two things are essentially the same type of software. When you use a roll out an intake to procure or orchestration software, you want that intake to be really, really easy. I'm talking, it shouldn't take, on average, anybody more than 2 to 3 minutes to submit. And even 3 minutes feels long. Like, it should be very quick. You should not attempt to gather all the information because, frankly, you will never get it, right? So you
In
shouldn't
many
ask
cases,
for
they don't know yet either.
that's correct. You shouldn't ask for, if it's software, you shouldn't ask for the data elements. You should just basically ask, like, hey, is there data involved? And if there's data, then tell me what do you know, right? And
Soren,
so
before you can complete this request, you must attach the database schema and API detailed
yeah,
documentation.
yeah. Yeah, no,
Good luck.
literally keep it as simple. Like, if somebody tells me, hey, I want to buy something, I work in marketing and some software, right?
Yeah.
We're probably good enough, right? And I'm oversimplifying a little bit. We did have anywhere from, when we rolled it out, anywhere from 10 to 20 questions, depending on the conditions of what you told us.
Yeah.
But it should be fast. And because then ultimately the system works in a way that if I add additional, like if I say, hey, there's actually PIA, it spins up automatically a data privacy review step, right? So the system adjusts the workflow
Yep.
automatically as it discovers them. And quite frankly, what I do as the first steps after I say, hey, this is my ticket, I grab it, right? Assign it to myself. I'm going to schedule 15 minutes with you in order to have you tell me all the stuff that you didn't tell me when you submitted. That's fine, because it also helps with setting expectations, with figuring out what have you talked to the vendor about, what has been promised, truly what's the deadline, how mission critical is this, all the stuff that I might have asked, but really get sort of ubiquitous, kind of like not very clear answers, right? And
Yeah.
that way we start off on the same page, and then I can make sure that all the other information and all the other alignment that's happening happens in the workflow, and that can happen asynchronously. But I find that an easy, super simple intake process really, really important. That discovery call, 15 minutes is usually the length that I schedule. Also really important because it gets kind of we can synchronize, and then the rest happens in the tool. All the conversations, all the data documentation, inviting a vendor to upload certain documentation, all that happens in the orchestration tool. And that's the power of, like, now I don't need to explain to you or to the next approver where we're at. I can spend my time explaining to them how to read a ticket. I do that once, right?
Yep.
Request. But now if the next 50 times that happens, or 100 times, they actually know.
Yep.
Right? I now kind of teach them how to fish themselves. And that
Yes.
the type of process of having all that information in one place and having everybody go to that same place eliminates about 75%, by my measure, about 75% of all emails related to a procurement request. So think about it. If I get normally 200 emails a day, which is not that outrageous, that rounds down to 50.
For all of those extra questions of, hey, Soren, you remember that thing we were talking about last week? Where is
That's right.
that? Or, hey,
That
what's next? Or, hey, how's that going? Or all of
there,
those little things that if those emails aren't answered, it detracts from the sense of customer service and reinforces this black box with procurement of, I don't know where it is. I don't know what's going on. But you
yeah,
make it visible. It's so powerful because it gives them the equivalent of, well, I ordered some food and you can see the little dot as the food is getting
that's
closer to your house,
or
right?
they're baking the pizza, right? And
Yeah.
then they're delivering it, kind of thing. Also, it helps the stakeholder understand, like, hey, it's not necessarily procurement that's slow, right? But there's a legal approval, there's an IT infosec approval, right? And if that is stuck there, right, I've pointed the stakeholder to, like, hey, find out, reach out to infosec, this person, right? Find out what they need from you, or I've scheduled a call, right? In most cases, I actually do it in terms of, like, let's just get on the same page. But there's kind of, it demystifies that, right? And it's not just us saying, oh, we need to have this, right? It's basically somebody else saying, hey, this is part of the approval process. In order to have this standardized and correctly approved, we need to make sure that those folks understand what's being asked. And in case of doubt, reach out to them directly, right? And that's really, really powerful, because it, again, educates everybody, and it also it provides for, you can now spend your time helping with the alignment and helping re-explaining what's trying to be done.
It's so much simpler. And
Yeah,
it creates, it's like the difference of a concierge versus a maze
that's
to
correct.
find out what you want. And if you're designing the intake and orchestration tool deployment based around all of the things that procurement and finance and IT need, as opposed to making it simple and feel like a concierge for the person that's asking for it, then you're thinking about it backwards, right?
That's right. Yeah, and I also think that what I want to be very clear, and we obviously speaking about the benefits of shifting what's historically been very administrative efforts of re-explaining into, now I have more time to be more strategic and actually to get things done, and make sure that we aligning truly the legal risk with the way we build it and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
What I want to highlight is that that's the backbone of automation. When when people talk about automation or what can AI do for me, if you're wondering what's the first step, the first step has to be figure out which automation orchestration solution is right for you, right? So if you have an SAP system, Convergent IS is probably the ideal solution, right?
Oh, thank you.
If you have a NetSuite type of system, right, you can look at Zip or like companies that have that are competitors to them, right? If you are with a different ERP or an on-prem ERP system that is not SAP, you probably should look at Oral Lab or providers like Tonki and so forth that providers like that. So there's lots of, the beautiful part is nowadays there's lots of solutions out there, no matter where you're at with your systems, on-prem, in the cloud, or anything in between, right? The point is the gap today actually exists in the procurement leadership not knowing how to automate, right?
Yeah. And
And
what good looks like.
and what it looks like, right? And the answer is very simple. It's a orchestration system, right? That becomes an overlay to your ERP, an overlay probably also to your P2P system if you have one. I wouldn't buy the intake to procure from the P2P providers. It's not their strong suit. It will feel like pretend relative to what a pure play software solution looks like. You should also not bother with a spend cube. Quite frankly, even when I've implemented a spend cube, I still had to go back to finance to validate the numbers. And there was always like, no, that doesn't work, or it's not correct. The reason is that a spend cube usually doesn't account for the accounting treatment, especially if you do short periods. Like over a year, you're mostly right. But if you go like monthly spend or like those numbers are out of the spend cube are always wrong. So
And
don't
if you're
buckle.
asking finance who's comparing it to their numbers that maybe weren't correct in the first place, trying to convince them that they weren't correct is an entire project on its own.
Yeah, and it doesn't add any value.
Yeah.
Again, backwards looking versus forward being proactive, right?
Yeah.
So SpendCube is a waste of time. If you are wondering, should I do a CLM solution, contract lifecycle management solution versus orchestration? Understand that CLM is a legal, it's a software for legal, right? To put in contract terms and that legal review. I would start again with the orchestration system because quite frankly, AI, when it's integrated in your orchestration system, it can do contract reviews. It can flag sections
Yep.
out of that contract, right? And that's a very natural way for AI, generative AI, or whatever you want to call it, to sit in that solution and actually help out, right? Because that makes sense. Like as a procurement professional, I should be reviewing the contract, right? But not everybody, none of us usually are trained legal minds, right? So the answer there is like, hey, let us give you let us help you, like us as in like AI. Let's get some help and have some standardized way of looking at it. And then I know at flag a section, I know I should look there, right? Payment terms are in the contract net 30 and my standards net 60. The AI can very easily flag that. The AI can flag stuff like auto renewals and that kind of stuff, right? So you could have an AI truly augment that process and expedite that as well, right? That I believe is when we talk about then AI and all that fancy stuff that people talk about, that's where it sits naturally, and that's where it can then supercharge your or enable your procurement process on top of that. But again, starting point has to be, in my experience, orchestration software.
I love it.
And then you can bolt on a P2P software on top of that. By the way, companies sell that, right? Even if I didn't connect to my ERP, right? If that couldn't be done, I would still recommend implementing a orchestration software for procurement, and then wait till all those integrations are enabled.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Obviously, I have a little bit of bias around where intake and orchestration play a role. I can think back to 2014, 2015 doing intake before it was even called intake. So I know we have some shared passion around this. Soren, I deeply appreciate you taking some time to go and share the context, the experience, the wisdom with this community. I want to thank you again and wish you all the very best. And for all of you watching, this has been another edition of The Never Ending Climb for a Stronger Supply Chain and Procurement. Thanks, everyone. Until next week.
Bye-bye.